Good afternoon, YouTube. It's Tom Bentley here from the TB Yacht Broker YouTube channel. I hope this finds you well. I hope this finds you safe and inside somewhere. I've been racking my brains to think about what I can do to serve my clients best during this time. Now, obviously, this time, if you're watching this YouTube video in 8 months, a year, or whenever it may be, we are obviously right in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic at the minute, and as such are being isolated or quarantined inside our own houses. So I've been racking my brains to try and think about what I can do to best serve my clients that I already know, the clients that I've yet to meet, and essentially trying to put out as much knowledge as I possibly can out onto the kind of World Wide Web, the socials, etc., so that people who are at home and are looking over LinkedIn, over YouTube, whatever it may be, have a portal that they can come to ask questions that they may not have wanted to ask before because of fear of maybe being looked like they were too interested in buying a new boat or a used boat, or they just never had the time to sit down and consider this. It had always been a bit of a pipe dream or a kind of a retirement project, and they decided that they would put it off until said time. Now, I'm fully aware that at the minute, the kind of the buying and sales process of a boat that I'm either representing or my company is representing, the chances of that happening are quite low at the minute. We are, to kind of bring a bit of positivity back into that, we are still receiving deposits. I've listed quite a few boats over the last week or so. So the engine is still turning, and I think the key thing here is knowing that we will come out the other side of this. There is a lot of positivity moving forward. We're all still working very, very hard in order to best serve our clients as physically possible as we're able to at the minute. So this video here, a little bit different from my usual videos of walking around boats I'm either listing or stock boats that we currently have. I thought I would put together a slideshow of some key points to consider when buying a boat, and either new or used. And that's not just from us at Sunseeker, that's across the whole kind of broad spectrum of any boat that's currently out there. Obviously, I'm slightly biased being a Sunseeker broker, but I wanted to, like I say, best serve my clients by putting some knowledge out there. And of course, if you have any further questions off the back of this, you're more than welcome to contact me. It's completely no obligation. I'm not expecting you to suddenly come down and buy a new boat or buy a used boat, whatever it may be. This is completely here for you to just trawl through. And if you've got any further questions, my contact details will be at the end of this slideshow. So without further ado, let's move on to the first point. So the first point I want to bring up here is how much can you spend, or what is your budget, is usually a key question that I ask my clients, especially new clients, when they come to me and try and discuss with me what type of boat they want. Now, there is a massive difference between wanting a boat or a certain size of boat and having that said boat. And the difference always comes down to realistically the budget and how much you can spend. 9 times out of 10, clients will want to have something bigger that they can necessarily afford. And that's because obviously the costs of the boat overall has a lot of additional extras. We're talking berthing, we're talking maintenance, we're talking fuel, consumables, we're talking all these kind of raft of extras, which I'll go into a little bit later on in the slideshow. But it's you have to have an idea of roughly how much this costs. Berthing in various different countries, for sake of example, will wildly change. For sake of example, I was with a client and we were looking at berthing his Manhattan 52 in Mallorca. We flew over to Mallorca together. We looked around a few marinas. We then flew to mainland Spain together. We went to Alicante. And the difference in costs between Mallorca and Alicante was sizable for this size of boat, or for any size of boat really. And the client then decided to keep the boat in Alicante instead, for a kind of cost per return, realistically. So we'll look at kind of where the boat's going to be a bit later on. But realistically, in terms of costs, you've got to think that the overall cost of the boat is not the final cost. There is a kind of a decent size in terms of running that boat throughout the year that you need to be able to accompany for. And that may mean that you're not able to afford the boat that you want, but can afford the boat or that in accordance to the budget you have, is my point there. So be realistic is what I'm trying to say. The one key point I want to pick up here as well is obviously depending on your situation, understand the tax rules that are going to be applying to a boat purchase. As with anything, you have to add tax onto the purchase of the boat, and that will depend on the actual country that you're bringing that boat into. So obviously in the UK we have a VAT percentage of 20%, so 20% gets added on to the final price of the boat. In Villamora, Portugal, for sake of example, the cost there is 23%, so there's a difference in cost there. So you have to be aware that actually a 3% on obviously a sizable purchase can make a huge difference. So be aware of where you're putting that boat in. Now, I'm not going to go into the legalities of kind of tax avoidance schemes for sake of example. I can certainly put you in touch with people who know this background a lot more than I do. I'm not a tax advisor. Realistically, 9 times out of 10, my clients will just pay the VAT and then be safe in the knowledge that when people do come onto the boat, they can show them that tax paid invoice. So it's not for me on this platform right now to discuss whether you can or cannot get away with paying tax. Moving on to cash or finance, obviously depending again very much on your situation, but it's always good to look at what marine mortgages you can get in order to finance the boat. And obviously this could potentially enable you to go to that bigger size that you want rather than necessarily what the budget gives you. Now we work with a lot of different marine mortgage companies, CGI, Lombard, Close Brothers to name a few. Really good, great guys there. They will, depending on again the size of the boat, the amount that you're borrowing, the deposit that you can put down, they can structure, either a kind of 10 to 15 year mortgage, a VAT paid mortgage as well, so you can include the VAT on that payment. And most of those guys there will have somewhere between about 4 to 5% cost of borrowing that money. Again, depending on the situation that they're in, and also obviously setup fees around that as well. But it's certainly worth looking into depending on your situation. And realistically, I think over the next few years we will see a lot more finance style purchase agreements, a bit like kind of how cars, PCP, etc., are being bought. I think that will transfer across into our industry. One key point that is linked to this is dividends. Obviously, if you own your own business, there is potentially, depending on how much you're taking out of the business at any one time, there is quite a serious tax for taking those dividends out of the company in order to pay for the boat, to release some cash. So actually financing the boat through a marine mortgage company could be a good way of bridging that gap, so that therefore you're not being stung on said kind of liabilities of pulling that out of the business. Again, like I said, I'm not a tax advisor, but those schemes are available and you can discuss those with the finance brokers. I've just put down here at the bottom the 10% rule. The 10% rule of thumb within the industry is that the overall cost of the boat that you paid for the boat at the start is roughly 10% of what you're going to pay per year in maintenance, upkeep, insurance, berthing, consumables. Now for me, I think the 10% rule is a bit high. I think in kind of the market that I work in, I think realistically we're talking more about 8%. And again, it all depends on how much you use the boat and where you're putting the boat and whether you've got a captain or a full crew or not, or whatever it may be. So again, coming back to it, be realistic on how much you can spend. because the last thing you want is to not want to go out and use the boat, for sake of example, because you're a bit anxious about how much money you're going to spend through fuel or whatever it may be. So think, put a good budget sheet together and put that down on the boats that you want to buy. Now, moving on to the next point of where are you going to keep it? Now, again, this ties into a point I picked up earlier in terms of cost. So obviously various different places will have various different kind of structures, payment structures, cost per size, whether you're renting the berth or whether you're buying the berth. Obviously, it's difficult. Berths are a premium in terms of space. So there's lots of factors to consider there. But again, do your homework. I regularly go out with clients and we'll take 3 or 4 days and we'll fly from the UK and we'll say, right, we're going to go to Alicante, we're going to go to Villamora, we're going to go to Croatia, or we're going to go to Mallorca, and we're going to look at all the marinas that are there. Thankfully, Sunseeker have 41 offices in mainland Europe now, so you're never too far away from a Sunseeker office. And that comes a bit later into the point I'm going to make about support. But realistically, we go and meet all of the Marina Sunseeker guys, the guys that run the offices down there, and then the client will make a kind of a decision based on how quickly it takes for them to fly from where they are. I've got, again, the client that's based in Alicante. He's based in Bristol in the UK, and he's quite close to the airport. So for him, he's on a EasyJet flight. He's out to Alicante in a few hours, and it's 20 minutes from the airport to the boat. So great. I mean, if you lived up in Manchester and you wanted to get down to a boat on the south coast in the UK, you'd potentially take longer getting down there than you would getting to Alicante. So just think about the terms of access of where you are, how close you are to airports, how close the boat is to airports on the other side, etc., etc. And then we've obviously already discussed cost. Now, obviously, cruising area is a big key point in this. Mallorca is obviously seen as the mecca of boating, but there are some fantastic places out there. The Croatia, Amalfi Coast, south of France. We've got 5 offices in south of France. So you've really got to take into account of what your likes are, whether you've been on holiday to certain places, whether you've been on to amazing restaurants that you know about. All of the offices that I work with can tell you all of these points, but think about your cruising area because you're going to have the boat down there for quite some time. 95%, 98% of our boats, when they leave the UK, will go to the Mediterranean and will be put on the back of a ship to go to the Mediterranean as well. So think about where you're going to position that boat so you can take best advantage of the cruising area that you're in. And finally, support as well, as I've just briefly touched on it just then. Again, biased, but we have 41 offices in the UK, in the mainland Mediterranean, if you like. So you need to know that there's always going to be an office of who you bought that boat from relatively close. The Sunseeker London group, who obviously I work for, we basically come under one big umbrella. So for sake of example, if I sold a boat into France, Portugal, Croatia, Spain, wherever it may be, and there is an issue on the boat, I can just call that office and I can get that issue fixed and organised and sorted in a very quick turnaround. It wouldn't be a case of you rocking up to the Croatian office and saying, look, I've got my Sunseeker Manhattan 52 here. There's something wrong with the water pump. Could you fix it for me? And they turn around and say, no, you bought it through the UK dealer, so you've got to go back to them. We are one big Sunseeker family, so the support network is absolutely key for you in terms of owning your boat and wherever it may be. Who are you going to buy from? So I'm going to run through a list of some key elements here. Obviously, there's a fantastic amount of new boat builders all around the world. Again, this very much kind of depends on your size and scope. Again, giving Sunseeker as an example, the biggest yacht we currently make is a 131 yacht made out of GRP. That's 131 feet, by the way. As you would have known in the news, that we will be going up to a 161, 161 feet, built in conjunction with Icon Shipyards, and that will be a kind of fast displacement aluminium style hull. But that depends realistically on what type of boat and what size and scope you want to buy. But working within our space, again, looking at key elements, build quality, get yourself to boat shows, get onto boats, open cupboards, see how quick release catches work, feel the weight of a door handle, see if the slow kind of draw mechanism works. Just have a look at how the grouting has been done in the bathrooms. Like these are all key aspects of knowing that that boat has been built to an absolutely fantastic specification, and just making sure that there's no real kind of corners to cut. The history that goes into a boat builder, into what types of models that they've produced, what size, where they've come from, what their facilities are. Go and visit the shipyards. As a broker, I'm being based in Poole, next to the shipyard. It is sometimes quite difficult trying to get clients from abroad, but even London, because it's 3.5 hours down on the motorway. So come and visit us at the shipyard. Come and see what the facilities are like. Come and talk to the guys that are on the floor that are laying the fiberglass up. That's the only way you're really going to know. And I'm touching on kind of new build boat here, but that's the only way you're really ever going to know what the quality is like, and you'll be able to see it for yourself from day one. Kind of it shows how tidy the workspace is to how well organized these guys are in terms of building boats. Another key thing is obviously the model age. So just keep an eye out and speak to your broker about what else might be coming out down the line. Whether the factory have got plans to kind of facelift or remap or whatever it may be. It's good to just have the knowledge of what the next 6 months to a year for that boat builder actually looks like, so that you don't end up buying something that suddenly goes out of fashion within a month. So there's some key aspects there, and I think realistically the most important thing is speak to your broker, come down to a shipyard, whether it be us, whether it be whoever, and just have a good look around and really understand what you're buying. There's not many car companies in the world that would necessarily invite you to their factory to come and have a look at the build process. So we're really keen to encourage clients to come down and have a look. Now, the age-old question, a new or a used purchase, and again, this comes very much down to the client's own personal perspective. You could do a whole presentation on the pros and cons of buying this, and obviously budget is going to come into this and various other bits. But I've just listed a few key points here into this point here. Obviously, the depreciation of the boat, once that comes off the build line, you're going to want to know kind of realistically what that boat is going to depreciate by, and whether that's something you feel comfortable with or not. The most common question I usually get as a broker is, I'm looking for one that's about a year old or about 8 months old because someone else has taken the hit on the depreciation and has already paid the tax or whatever it may be. Now that's fine. Obviously, you run then the risk of not being able to spec the boat to your own specification, and kind of clients that have come down that road with me then often end up buying new anyway, because they say, well, this is something I've been working towards my whole life, so I want it absolutely perfect. So for me, actually having the perfect boat is fine, and if the depreciation is the cost of that, then that's what it is. Another key point to think about is the warranty on the boats that you're buying. So obviously if you're buying new, to give you an example, the warranty on a brand new Sunseeker is 2 years for every fixture, fitting, everything that you can see on the boat is warranted for 2 years. The engine suppliers, whether they be Volvos or MANs or MTUs, have their own warranty built into those as well, which you can extend through the engine manufacturer as well. So just be aware of what the warranty situation is and whether the boat has got any warranty left on it or not, as the case may be, because that might be, if you're buying a kind of a used boat, that might be something you have to rely on depending on how the owner before you has looked after that boat. Repair costs. Now, obviously, if you are buying used, you might be tempted by a cheaper price because it is a used boat. But then, obviously, you have to then think about what the repair costs of that boat are going to be. This comes into the access of using a survey and sea trial a bit later on, which I'll talk about in the next couple of slides. But just take that into your head as to whether you'll be happy to take on a boat that needs a few jobs being done, or whether you'd prefer something brand spanking new that the warranty can take care of bits that are inevitably going to be happening with the boat. Resale value. So obviously this comes down to spec as well, but I would also think about, if you are buying new or used, what the kind of resale value is going to look like. There's a bit of depreciation comes into this as well, and I can't talk for figures in terms for every boat builder that's out there, because there's a huge plethora of different information. But just like buying a brand new car, you'll tend to find that a boat will come off the build line, if you like, and be delivered, and there will be a drop in depreciation, and then after that kind of 1-2 year period, that the cliff, if you like, starts to level out, and the depreciation then becomes the same kind of per annum. And then as we get probably around the 5 year mark, that really starts to drop down from there. So just understand what your resale value of the boat might look like, and what you're getting back in return a bit later on down the line from there. Obviously, we've just talked about size and budget anyway, so that's obviously going to play into a factor about whether you can buy new or used. You might find that you can buy something a lot bigger on a used side on your current budget, but then the maintenance is going to be a lot more expensive to what you can afford anyway. So you have to just play those off a little bit. And the last key point I want to bring up on this slide is your dealer approved stock. Some people may not be aware of this, but again, boat builders such as ourselves or the Sunseeker London Group, the dealership that I work for, we obviously take boats in as a part exchange value against a new build boat. Now, that can range across various different styles. It could be on old Sunseekers, old Princesses, old Fairlines, old whatever. Now, often we will have a bank of boats in stock that we need to liquidate in order to make the deal that we agreed before happen and kind of liquidate itself all the way through. So look out, if you are looking for maybe a used boat, look out for dealer approved stock. We offer a 3-month labour warranty on any dealer approved stock that we sell. So if any jobs have been done to that, like I said, 3-month labour warranty are on there. And obviously the sea trial and survey has been done by us before we've taken that boat into stock as well. So we know exactly what we're taking into stock. So that removes a cost for you, but also gives you a bit of peace of mind that we've gone through this boat with a fine tooth comb, and we know exactly what's potentially a few bits that are wrong with it, and we can help fix those before taking those on. So talk to your broker about dealer approved stock that's currently out there, rather than necessarily brokerage. A key point in your boat buying process is asking who is representing you in this process. Bear kind of the boats that are on Gumtree, eBay, and various kind of other slightly smaller sites, or not necessarily sites dedicated to selling boats. Every boat that's listed out there will have either a broker selling it, or a broker is representing the shipyard that they are working for, or an independent, to be able to walk you through this process. Now, I've put down here a NBP broker, and what that stands for is a no bullshit process broker. And realistically, what I mean by that is, find yourself a broker that is going to tell you the truth, tell you whether they think it's a good deal, tell you whether you're negotiating too hard or too little. Just basically find someone that you feel comfortable with in taking you through this process. There's a lot of money kind of within this process, a lot of money flying around, and it's finding someone that you feel key. And I pride myself on the relationships that I now have with my clients, having known them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I feel friendly with them. I feel that I can go out for beers with them and not talk about boats whatsoever. I've been invited on clients' holidays. We've been out to dinners and various other bits. So that's the key thing for me, is people buy from people that they trust, and it's the same everywhere. So this is your own money that you're dealing with. It's your fund money that you're dealing with, if you like. So just find yourself a no bullshit broker, and your life will be so much simpler in terms of handling the title, the VAT invoices, the passing of title across between parties. Protection is another key one here as well. So if we're taking deposits in, or if we're taking in full monies into us as a group, that money goes into a client holding account, and therefore is not moved anywhere until we've got the say so of the buyer, the vendor, or us as well. And if there are any kind of bits that need to be taken out of that for costs that have been incurred, then we can make sure that happens as well. So there's a lot of protection that happens there within your money, etc., etc. And I've just put a quote down there that Eddie Jordan, who's bought quite a few numerous Sunseekers from us, has given in terms of finding a good broker. And just paraphrasing, he does say obviously that most people are critical of brokers, that we just sit there for the commission, but once you find a really good one, they just make all the work for you just absolutely disappear, and you can concentrate on finding and owning your fantastic boat. So find yourself a good no bullshit broker. I'm just going to run through the actual buy process of a used boat, and we will come on to new in a second. And as you can see, I've just put a picture up here of our Sunseeker brokerage website. We sell somewhere in the region of about 160, 170 brokerage boats per year, and they're all listed on that site there. There is a little box that you can type in to message a broker as well. All of our profiles have got WhatsApp, phone numbers, etc., etc., and obviously all the specs and 3D walkthroughs. So have a good look on that site if you're looking for anything in particular. But in terms of buying a process, let's say we found the boat that we want, and the next step is to agree a deal with the person that is selling that boat, whether it's us as a dealer approved boat, or whether we're just acting as the bit in the middle, if you like, whether we're just managing the sale between you as the buyer and the seller of that boat. So you basically putting an offer across to the owner and getting that accepted is the first step, and that's obviously done in writing and done through an email basically. Now once that's happened, a MOA, or a Memorandum of Agreement, will be drawn up between the two parties, and also a 10% deposit will be paid from the buyer across into our client holding account. So that MOA there is a very simple document. It obviously states how the kind of the sales process has now started. It gives a certain amount of timeline in terms of when a sea trial and survey needs to be completed by, when the completion date needs to be settled, and there's kind of quite a few bits in terms of, let's say for sake of example, if the boat is chocked to shore, then it is down to the buyer's responsibility to return that boat back to being chocked to shore after a sea trial, unless there's some sort of other agreement, for sake of example. So there's lots of protection for both sides within that MOA, and I'm happy to provide you guys with a sample MOA that you can have a good look over. Now, so once that's signed and the deposit's been sent across, then a survey and sea trial can then be initiated. And as you can see my point here, don't buy without one. It's like buying a new house without getting a survey. Just get yourself a survey, accept the cost for what it is. Usually most surveys are, depending on whether the surveyor is travelling to, but you're probably looking for around about £800 to £1,200 for a day's work for the sea trial and the survey. Just get your survey done. And the most important point to make here is that the surveyor is employed by the buyer, not the broker or the owner of the boat. So I don't get to see that survey report unless the buyer is happy for me to see it. So that gets sent directly to buyer. So they're employed by you. So just get them done, get them sorted, and we can talk about what actually happens in a survey in another podcast video or whatever it may be. So the survey gets done, the sea trial gets done, and so long as kind of everything's okay, and again, it's a bit like having an MOT on the boat. You'll get a list of advisories that will say need to be done within the next 6 months, need to be done within the next year, or just keep an eye on them type of thing. Now, once that's all kind of come out and both the buyer and the seller have agreed that they're happy with the survey results, then the deal is then further agreed. The rest of the money is then pushed across from the buyer into our client account. And then the completion date and the passing of title happens, where we move the bill of sale, the VAT certificates, the build certificates, etc., etc. That all then gets moved over to the new owner. It's just like buying a house. There is a set date, sometimes a set time of when that, and sometimes a set location, depending on the type of boat, of when of passing that title over. Now, in terms of cost, the commission that we earn through this whole process is taken then out of what the old owner gets back to him. So obviously we've agreed a commission rate with them for selling the boat. So we take our monies out of the money that goes across. So you as a buyer don't have to pay realistically for that broker to be doing the work. Obviously you have to pay for your sea trial and your surveyor and potential lift in and out, but you don't have to pay for the broker. He's paid from the or he or she is paid from the other side. So that's used. Buy process in terms of new, and I'm going to kind of work on the Sunseeker one because obviously that's the one I have the most knowledge of. In terms of Sunseeker, again, so we come down to choosing the model of the boats, depending on what you would like, what size, what budget, what scope, etc., etc. And what we do is we put together a specification of that boat. I've got a really handy app on my iPad and my phone, and it will literally take 15 minutes to specify kind of a 76 yacht, for sake of example. Now, what we're doing in that specification period is we're putting all the kind of the hardware in. The soft furnishings and colours come a bit later down the line, depending on where we are and what slot we're going for. But realistically, we're getting in kind of whether we're upgrading the Simrad systems or navigation systems. Are we putting a gyroscope in the boat? Are we putting a full med pack in the boat? Is it going to be a high? Is there going to be a high-low platform on the boat, etc., etc.? So they're kind of the really big chunky stuff, the hardware, etc., etc. That's when that's all kind of decided. And depending on how far away we are from the mould date, obviously those bits can move around a fair amount. But at some point we will, between us as a company and yourself, we will then decide on that specification, and that will form part of the contract. Now, we then choose a build slot within the factory, so it's not a case of ringing up the factory and saying, right, we've sold a Predator 50, can you start building one? So we have build slots within the factory as we go. So obviously the most popular ones are the ones that are for the start of the season. So we tend to sell and have already sold, for sake of example, slots for 2021 and 2022 for the start of the season. So realistically, boats that are coming out of the factory around about February time, those slots have kind of almost dried up because of the fact that people want their boats for the start of the season, and we've got to factor in a bit of PDI time and transport, which I'll come on to in a second. But we pick the build slot within the factory. You get your own very much unique build slot number. To give you an example, the boat that I was looking at recently was boat number 4882052. So the 488 refers to the build number of the boat. The 20 refers to 20, the year of build, and the 52 responds to the model number of the boat as well. So you get your own specific build slot number, and then everything is then related down to that number there. Now, in terms of the payment process, we will take 20% deposit of the overall cost on the signature of contract. The next 30% is then done on the mould date of the boat. So sometimes those can be quite close together. For sake of example, if you've signed a contract at the Southampton, Monaco or Cannes boat show, the mould date could be as early as October. So those sometimes can be quite close together. So you've got to kind of just take that into account with your cash flow. The next 30% is then done on the engines arriving to the factory, and which, again, depending on your style of boat, when that is. And then the final 20% is then on completion and handover and acceptance of that boat. So that's the kind of the overall kind of rough costing. Obviously, we can be quite flexible in certain terms. Obviously, it comes down to a case-by-case basis, realistically. But the last point there, PDI and transport. I tend to try, clients who want their boats for the very, very, very start of the season, I tend to try and put them into the slots where the boat is actually coming out of the factory in, say, February time, because it realistically takes around about 3 weeks to properly PDI a whole boat. And then we've got to think about transport. Notice I didn't say delivery here, I said transport. So if you are thinking about having the boat in the Mediterranean, then actually having a boat ship that across to the Med from Southampton is going to take a bit of time. So we've got to factor that in to make sure that you're then onto your boat kind of right at the start of the season. One point I haven't put here on this slide, which is just reminding me of myself, is the handover process. In terms of handover for us at Sunseeker, handover can be as long as you want. I've done handovers which have lasted an afternoon because the owner's, this is his 5th Sunseeker, or I've done handovers that have lasted 4 days because they're brand new to boating and they want to know everything about it. And we go through everything from systems to driving to parking, and just making sure that the client is absolutely happy. And a couple of times what I've done, it's quite hard to, or it can be quite easy, sorry, to overload a client with lots of information. So sometimes I'll do 2 or 3 days and then we'll put another day in about a month's time just to kind of have a bit of a follow-up and a bit of a revision, if you like, on what we've learned from before. So that gives you a rough guide to buy new. My last point, realistically, is if you want it, buy the boat. That's do the deal, buy the boat. There's so many clients of mine that I talk to who have told me that owning a Sunseeker has been the kind of what they've been reaching for their whole working life. They've always got pictures of Sunseeker on the back on their kind of laptops. They're always thinking about when they're going to retire and when they're going to spend all of this time on the boat. So look, I think it's something that's quite prominent at the minute, having seen what the stock kind of stocks and shares have done in terms of kind of pulling out or losing a fair amount of money through pensions, etc. A lot of my clients at the minute are talking to me and saying, look, I wish I'd bought it last year because at least I would have a tangible asset that I can enjoy once this kind of corona stuff finishes. So my advice to you is once you've found the boat, once you've found everything, don't dither, because the other conversation I have with clients is they say to me, yeah, I'm interested in this boat. What's the deal? What's this? Let's get the spec done, blah, 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 blah. And then they kind of forget about it for a few weeks. And then they call me up and say, right, Tom, I'm ready to do the next stage. And I have to turn around and say, I'm really sorry, but that boat's sold. The boat will go and it will sell. And it's realistically, it's for the person that just is the most active and puts the money, the deposit, or the signed contract in front of us first, that is going to ultimately own that boat. So I've had enough conversations with clients to say, I wish I'd bought that boat last year, or I'd wish I'd done this. And it's a horrible place to be, especially if you're buying used or dealer approved, because that particular boat in that condition may not come up again for another year and a half, 2 years. So once title has passed and you've got your new boat, wherever it may be, just enjoy it and just have fun with owning a boat. The last slide here is my contact details, so you can get to me at tombentley@sunseekerpool.com. My phone number is also just there as well, and also my YouTube channel, TB Yacht Broker. Any inquiries for new Sunseekers, used, dealer approved, I can help you with all of those bits. I'm more than happy at this particular time to have FaceTime, Zooms, WhatsApp messages, camera meetings like this, no problem whatsoever. I've also put our Sunseeker brokerage website as well, so you can click on that link or follow to that link and that will take you through to our brokerage websites where all of our current listings are listed. I recently put a new 2019 Sunseeker Predator 57 Mark II on there. A Fairline Squadron 53 has just gone up there as well. So there's lots and lots of different various boats suiting for any size or budget. Thank you very much for watching, and any questions, please don't hesitate to contact, and please don't, please do, sorry, subscribe in the little button that's on the corner. Many thanks.